The sky didn't explode all at once. It changed. At first, it was just noise, distant, unfamiliar, almost like a swarm of insects carried by the wind. People in Tel Aviv stepped outside, looking up, expecting the usual. Sirens had become part of life. Warnings came and went. Interceptions lit up the night, and then everything settled. Again, but this time, the sound didn't fade. It grew. Somewhere along the coastline, radar operators leaned forward in their chairs, eyes narrowing as the screens filled not with a few incoming objects, not even dozens, but something else entirely. Confirmed contacts, multiple. No, hold on. How many? A pause, the kind that shouldn't happen in a room trained for instant answers. Hundreds, and then the correction. More than hundreds, the air shifted. Because this wasn't a strike, this was saturation. Across defensive systems, alerts cascaded like a flood, Iron Dome batteries activated, interceptors prepared, command channels lit up with overlapping voices, each trying to make sense of something that didn't fit the expected pattern, vector tracking unstable too many targets, prioritize threats. Which ones? Because that was the problem, there were too many. High above the Mediterranean, the first wave approached, not fast like missiles, not loud like jets, but steady, relentless, and coordinated, small silhouettes moving in formation, each one insignificant on its own, but together, they became something else, a wall. Back in the city, the sirens finally came alive, not one, not a few, but continuous. A sound that didn't stop. People ran, some froze, some just stood there, staring at the sky as tiny blinking lights appeared in the distance, growing larger with every passing second, and then the first interceptions, streaks of light shot upward, interceptors racing to meet the incoming drones, explosions lit up the sky, one after another, bursts of fire, that briefly turned night into day. For a moment it looked like the system was working, targets destroyed, threats neutralized, but then more came, and more, and more. Because this wasn't a single wave, it was a flood that didn't end. Inside command centers, the realization hit harder than the alarms. We're being overwhelmed. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Everyone could see it. Interceptors were being used faster than they could be replenished. Systems designed to handle attacks were now being forced to choose which threats to stop and which to let through. That's when the first drone slipped past, then another and another. The sky above Tel Aviv began to change color, not just from interceptions, but from impacts, a flash in the distance, then closer still, each one followed by a shockwave that rolled through the streets, rattling windows, shaking buildings, breaking the illusion that everything was under control, because it wasn't. This wasn't defense anymore. This was survival. On the ground, emergency services scrambled to respond, but the situation was moving faster than they could react. Fires broke out, power flickered, communication lines strained under the sudden surge of activity, and above it all, the drones kept coming. They didn't panic, they didn't hesitate, they didn't change course. They just kept moving forward, one after another, as if guided by a single, unstoppable intent. Across the region, military observers watched in disbelief. This wasn't just an attack. It was a demonstration of what happens when quantity becomes a weapon, because each drone didn't need to succeed, it just needed to exist, to force defenses to react, to consume resources, to create gaps, and once those gaps appeared, the rest followed. Back in the Persian Gulf, the atmosphere was no less tense. U.S. naval forces had been monitoring the situation from the beginning, their advanced systems tracking launches, movements, patterns, aircraft carriers, symbols of power, projection, control stood ready, their decks filled with aircraft prepared for rapid deployment. But even there, something felt different, drone activity increasing across multiple sectors. From where? Multiple launch points? Difficult to isolate. Are we being targeted? No answer came immediately, because the data didn't show a direct strike. Not yet, but it showed something else. Encirclement, small, fast-moving contacts appearing at the edges of detection, probing, testing, mapping responses, not attacking outright, but positioning, watching, learning, and that was enough. Because in modern warfare, you don't need to strike to create pressure. You just need to make the threat real. On one carrier deck, a pilot looked up as a distant object flickered across the horizon, too small to identify clearly, too slow to be a missile, too deliberate to ignore. Visual contact, bearing confirm if hostile, unknown, that word again, unknown, the most dangerous word in any conflict, because it forces hesitation, and hesitation creates vulnerability. Within minutes, orders began to shift, not publicly, not dramatically, but subtly. Aircraft repositioned, patrol patterns adjusted, defensive, systems heightened, and then a decision. one that wouldn't be announced in bold terms, but would be understood by those watching closely. Pull back, not retreat, not defeat, just repositioning. Because staying too close, too exposed in an environment where small, inexpensive drones could create disproportionate risk was no longer strategic. It was dangerous, and that danger had just been proven. Back in Tel Aviv, the night had turned into something unrecognizable. Sirens still echoed, smoke rose from multiple points across the city, emergency lights painted the streets in flashing red and blue as responders moved through chaos that hadn't existed just hours before. People looked up not because they expected something new to appear, but because they couldn't believe what they had already seen. The sky, once controlled, now felt crowded, hostile, uncertain, and the question that lingered wasn't just about what had happened, it was about what it meant, because if this could be done once, what was stopping it from happening again? That question spread far beyond the city, across governments, across militaries, across analysts trying to understand the scale of what had just unfolded. Because large-scale drone warfare wasn't theoretical anymore, it wasn't experimental, it was real, and it worked. That realization carried weight because it changed calculations, changed assumptions, changed strategies that had been built on the idea that advanced systems could handle any incoming threat, but those systems had limits. And those limits had just been exposed. As dawn approached, the full extent of the night became visible, not total destruction, not complete collapse, but something more unsettling: proof. Proof that even the most advanced defenses could be strained, proof that even the most protected cities could be reached, proof that even the most powerful forces could be forced to adapt. And adaptation in moments like this is not optional, it's survival. Somewhere far from the smoke and sirens, decisions were already being made. New strategies, new defenses, new ways of thinking about a battlefield that no longer followed old rules, because this wasn't about one night, it was about what comes next. And what comes next is always shaped by what just happened. The sky over Tel Aviv slowly began to clear, but it didn't feel empty. It felt watched, measured, changed, and out over the waters of the Persian Gulf, massive ships moved slightly farther from the edge of uncertainty, not fleeing, not abandoning, but adjusting to a reality that had become impossible to ignore, because in this kind of conflict, power isn't just about strength, it's about adaptation, and the side that adapts faster shapes what happens next.